So, what happens when a single military operation completely reshuffles the deck on the global energy map, almost overnight? That's what we're digging into today. We're looking at a fascinating scenario set in 2026, a US-led regime change in Venezuela and the huge economic shockwaves that would ripple out from it.
All right, let's set the scene. Picture this. It's January 2026. In a lightning-fast operation, U.S. forces capture Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Now, that single act, well, it sets off this massive and immediate chain reaction that sends tremors through the entire global economy.
And that really gets us to the heart of the matter. A geopolitical earthquake of this size doesn't happen in a vacuum. It always creates very clear winners and very clear losers. So the big question is, who comes out on top in this new reality? And who gets left holding the bag? Let's break it all down.
But before we can really get into the winners and losers, we have to understand the backstory. We need to look at the economic situation in Venezuela that even set the stage for such a drastic move in the first place.
So Venezuela, a country sitting on some of the biggest oil reserves in the world, was in a really bad way. Its oil production had absolutely collapsed, dropping by more than 2/3. At the same time, it was getting much closer with U.S. rivals like China and Russia, sending its oil to Beijing and even seizing assets from American companies. You can see how this was building towards a serious confrontation.
Now, it is super important that we're clear about where this analysis is coming from. The whole framework we're exploring is from an economic analysis by E.J. Antoni. And our job here isn't to say he's right or wrong, but to simply explain his assessment of who wins and who loses in this scenario.
At the absolute center of Antoni's analysis is this idea he calls the Trump corollary. It's basically a new way of looking at U.S. foreign policy, but one that is laser-focused on economic power.
This timeline does a great job of showing how this new idea is framed as the next logical step. You start way back in 1823 with the Monroe Doctrine, which basically told Europe to stay out of the Americas. Then, you jump to 1904, and the Roosevelt corollary says the U.S. can step in to keep things stable. And now, the Trump corollary is presented as the 21st century version, adding this sharp, economic, America-first edge to it.
So what is this Trump corollary in plain English? In a nutshell, it's a policy that says U.S. economic interests in getting access to strategic resources, we're talking oil, minerals, you name it, come first in its own neighborhood. It's a very clear signal to rivals like China and Russia. This hemisphere is America's economic turf.
And this quote from the analyst, E.J. Antoni, just nails it. He basically says that while older policies were about military or political power, this new corollary boils everything down to one simple, incredibly powerful economic idea: America first.
All right, so we've got the theory down. Now let's see how it plays out. According to this analysis, who are the biggest economic winners in all of this?
The first and biggest impact is, no surprise, oil. The projection is that over time, you'd see an extra 1 to 2 million barrels of Venezuelan crude oil per day get rerouted away from places like China and sent straight to U.S. refineries. I mean, that is a staggering amount of energy.
An oil boom like that creates a huge ripple effect for the U.S. economy. It could help lower prices at the pump, which helps fight inflation. It's fantastic news for those Gulf Coast refiners built to handle this exact kind of oil. And it's not just oil. The policy is also about locking down access to other key things like rare earth minerals, making American supply chains much more secure.
But the analysis doesn't stop with the U.S. It also makes the case that the Venezuelan people are winners too. The thinking is that a flood of American investment to rebuild the country would create jobs and kickstart the economy. And you can see the market's reaction right here. Investor confidence just exploded, with the local stock market jumping 50 to 80%.
But a shift this big always has the flip side. For every winner, there's a loser. So let's flip the coin and look at who gets hurt in this new world order.
And here's where it gets really interesting. According to this assessment, the country that gets hit the hardest isn't some faraway rival. It's America's closest neighbor and ally. Canada is singled out as the biggest loser of all.
This slide really lays out the before and after perfectly. Before this happened, Canada held all the cards. They were the #1 supplier of the heavy crude U.S. refiners desperately needed, which gave them a ton of power in any negotiation. Afterwards, they're suddenly in a price war with a massive new supply from Venezuela. All that leverage, poof, gone.
And yeah, the markets reacted instantly. You can see it right here. The stock prices for Canada's big energy players, Cenovus, Canadian Natural Resources, Imperial Oil, all took a nosedive as soon as the news broke.
And it wasn't just Canada feeling the pain. The analysis also points to a few other predictable losers on the world stage. China loses a vital oil source and a key friend in the region.
Russia loses an important partner for its anti-US agenda, and of course, Cuba loses a critical lifeline. For all of them, it's a huge strategic blow.
So what's the big picture here? The argument is that this isn't just a one-off event. It's the first real-world test of a new doctrine that's meant to completely reset the rules of the game in the Western Hemisphere.
When you really break it down, the analysis lays it out like a clear, four-step playbook. Step 1. Take out the government that's in your way. Step 2. Reroute all their valuable stuff, like oil, directly to you. Step 3. Use American money to rebuild and control everything. And then Step 4, the real kicker. Use your new supply to pull the rug out from under everyone else, even your friends.
Which leaves us with the huge debate that this whole analysis kicks off. Is this a bold, pragmatic strategy to keep America prosperous and secure? Or, as critics mentioned in the source have suggested, is it something else entirely? A new kind of latter-day imperialism? Answering that question will probably define global politics for years to come.